6-point game. Things tightening at United Center. Mitchell has a deflected.
October 14th. And you've got to pay close attention right now because the tea leaves are practically shaking in the wind. And if you know how to read them, you can already see the ripple effect coming. This isn't just small talk anymore. It's turning into a storyline that could explode far beyond the hardwood. And I told y'all before, the political wave was creeping toward this Caitlin Clark situation. Well, here we are, right at the shoreline, with the tide pulling in faster than anyone expected. I said it this morning, and I'll say it again, there's a very real possibility that former President Donald Trump might step in and put his own spotlight on this. And if that happens, it won't just be a WNBA talking point. It'll be a national headline, a 24/7 news cycle kind of deal, the type that cable networks, late-night hosts, and international outlets will chew on for weeks. Because like it or not, the moment politics intersects with sports, especially with a player as polarizing and high-profile as Caitlin Clark, the reach multiplies exponentially. And listen, I'm not the kind of guy to keep beating the same drum unless the beat matters. But this right here is starting to feel spooky in the way big stories always do right before they blow wide open. The WNBA is about to find itself in the hottest seat it has ever been in. And if they think tossing a few green machines into the arena, making a couple of soft PR moves, or trying to quietly tweak things behind the scenes is going to make this go away, they're wrong, because if this catches full fire, nothing's putting it out quickly. And it's not going to stay confined to ESPN panels or niche sports blogs. No, this is the kind of thing that crosses borders, pops up on BBC World News, gets op-eds in the New York Times and The Guardian, maybe even finds its way into parliamentary questions in other countries where people debate sports and politics with the same intensity as local elections. And in the center of all this potential chaos is Caitlin Clark, a player who could very well flip this entire narrative on its head, depending on how things unfold. And here's the kicker behind the scenes. The person allegedly driving this storyline forward isn't just some anonymous PR intern or a bored fan page. It's said to be Erin Kane, her agent, working the phones, feeding the press, making sure this conversation doesn't fizzle out, pushing every possible button to keep the topic hot in the public arena. And you have to ask yourself, why? Well, the whispers say there's one huge reason Clark's been injured twice now. And while she's still a draw, those injuries have caused her stock, both in terms of on-court dominance and overall market momentum, to take a bit of a dip. In sports, perception matters as much as performance. And when your star client is suddenly sidelined, the narrative can spin away from you fast. So instead of letting people talk about what the Fever are doing without her or how they look when she's not playing, Kane might be flipping the script, framing the story as something bigger than basketball. Something that positions Clark not just as a great player but as a symbol in a larger, more emotionally charged conversation. And meanwhile, the noise around her absence hasn't died down. Fans online argue whether the team has the same spark without her. Analysts dissect how her presence changes the spacing on the floor, and all of that plays right into this growing storm. Now, enter Stephen A. Smith, the man who doesn't shy away from turning up the volume on a discussion. And today, he basically spelled it out for everyone in bold capital letters. They don't fix the whistle. Meaning, if they don't start calling the game in a way that feels fair toward Clark, then all hell is about to break loose. And here's the twist. He also says, if they do nothing, if they ease up on Clark and it still looks like she's being targeted in other ways, all hell's still going to break loose. In other words, there's no easy out here, because the perception game is already running on its own engine. And Stephen A. is out here making sure people understand the stakes. He's not mincing words. He's not sugarcoating it. He's telling players, league officials, and even casual fans that they need to read between the lines. Watch the tea leaves and understand the ripple effect this could have if mishandled. And he's right, because if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's sure as hell not a mongoose. Which is his way of saying don't get distracted by the noise. Pay attention to the patterns, because those patterns are where the truth hides. So yeah, that was Stephen A. Smith on First Take this morning, and whether you agree with him or not, you have to admit it was a fascinating segment. One of those moments where sports talk feels more like a high-stakes political debate, and this situation is only getting bigger from here. I wanted to drop that into the video real quick because it frames everything else we're about to talk about. And speaking of Caitlin Clark, here's the softer side of her current story. She's going to be on Bird's Eye View tomorrow with Sue Bird, which is notable because we haven't seen much of her lately outside of her sideline appearances. The Fever did celebrate Sydney Colson's birthday yesterday, singing for her in what was easily one of the most wholesome team moments of the season. The kind of chemistry building thing fans love to see, but other than that, Clark's been relatively low-key in public settings. And that makes tomorrow's sit-down with Bird even more intriguing to basketball minds from different generations sharing the same space. And the world finally getting to hear from Clark in her own words. After weeks of speculation, and while all that's brewing, here's a little side note for the die-hard WNBA followers. The trade deadline just passed. The Fever didn't make a single move, and honestly, I think that's the right call. When you've won 5 straight, why mess with the formula? Especially when you know the roster's about to get healthy again. But any momentum they were riding hit a major pothole today after a flat-out ugly loss to the Phoenix Mercury. 95-60, the kind of game that makes you scratch your head and wonder what went wrong from the opening tip. And while that was going on, we caught this clip from the game that's worth sharing, not because it was a highlight in the traditional sense, but because it showed the mix of banter, energy, and offbeat moments that make the WNBA fun to follow. You had a little exchange about looking at the wrong person, someone joking about the free throw routine, some applause breaking out in between, and a moment where you could hear my girl shouted out in the middle of the chaos, followed by someone explaining they were just 2 cowgirls on their last West Coast trip, trading love and laughs before getting back to the grind. It was a reminder that for all the political heat and media storms swirling around, at the core of this league are real human connections, personalities, and moments of levity, even in the middle of serious competition. And maybe that's the real reason why this Caitlin Clark story hits so hard for so many people, because she's not just an athlete in a vacuum. She's part of a league trying to balance business, image, and growth with the reality of its players' lives. And right now, all of that is about to collide on a stage that's bigger than anything the WNBA has dealt with before. And when that collision happens, you can bet it's going to be loud, messy, and impossible to ignore.
Lucas Bantam beats the buzzer for the layup. But for Clark, we'll get more news on her status moving forward.
You have to understand something right off the bat in professional sports, when an organization keeps you in the dark for this long. When they go out of their way not to show you a single shred of visual proof, no training clips, no warm-up footage, no behind-the-scenes glimpses, it almost always means one thing: they're holding something back. They're not just being quiet for the sake of privacy, they're controlling the flow of information, shaping the narrative, and making sure whatever story gets told is on their terms. And that, right there, is what has so many people in Indy, from die-hard Fever fans to local reporters, raising their eyebrows right now. There's this tension in the air, a low hum of suspicion, like everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can feel it in the way fans are talking online, the way questions are being asked at pressers, even the way the broadcasters drop subtle "we'll see what happens" comments during games. So, real quick here, before we get too deep into the bigger drama tonight, let's take a look at the playoff picture, because it tells you exactly why emotions are running this high. We'll pull up the standings, courtesy of Insider Alexa. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call her now, Insider Alexa. Because she's been breaking down the numbers and keeping it real with the details, here's what we're looking at. The Minnesota Lynx already clinched their playoff berth. Locked in tight, no sweat, no panic. They're playing chess while other teams are still figuring out the rules. The New York Liberty, sitting strong in second place, a powerhouse squad with depth at every position, firing on all cylinders. The Atlanta Dream, holding down that third spot with a mix of youthful energy and veteran savvy, looking like they could be a dangerous matchup for anyone. But the Fever, man, all the way down here in 6th place. And with that last loss they just took, plus the very real possibility they could drop another one in the next outing, it's not a stretch at all to imagine them sliding to 7th, maybe even 8th, heading into the playoffs. And that's not a great look. In the WNBA, where the postseason is shorter and matchups matter even more, one bad seed drop can turn what could have been a winnable first-round series into a matchup against a juggernaut, and nobody wants that. But hey, it is what it is. The league doesn't wait for anybody, and if you can't keep pace, you're going to feel it real quick. Now, let's shift gears to the other big headline tonight, the one that's been generating all kinds of chatter, reactions, and think pieces: Sophie Cunningham and her podcast. Yeah, This isn't just some random off-the-cuff comment. This is a player with a mic, a platform, and no fear of speaking her mind. At first, I was thinking of making a whole separate video for this, because it's juicy, but it's also part of a bigger pattern in the league right now, players calling out other players, referees, and even entire organizations without holding back. So, we're just going to roll it all into this one mega breakdown. Sophie's been stirring the pot lately, and the most recent flavor she's added to the stew. This whole special whistle conversation, and if you've been following along, you already know exactly what kind of talk I'm referring to. It's the kind of thing that starts in locker rooms, bubbles into fan debates, and then suddenly hits the airwaves with players confirming it out loud. But before we get too deep into the Paige Bueckers situation, we've got to rewind a bit and set the stage. Because Sophie's been dropping these little bombs for a while now, and one of the most interesting ones came when she was talking about Dana Bonner back in Phoenix. She sat there on her podcast and admitted there might have been a little beef because of something she said in a previous episode. Her co-host asked if she thought what happened in that game was connected to her comments from last week, and Sophie didn't even hesitate. Hell yeah, 1000%. That's not a maybe, not a could be, that's her saying yes, this is connected. She painted the picture, the tussling, the rough play, the chippiness on the court, and then she straight up laughed at the idea that it could have just been old teammates messing around. No, in her mind, it tied right back to the podcast. And that's when she explained that there's a deeper tension there. Some players on that opposing team used to be under Phoenix's coaching staff, and when Dana left, it didn't exactly leave everyone on warm, fuzzy terms. Sophie's point was clear. This isn't just about one comment. This is layered history. And if you've been around pro sports long enough, you know that history doesn't just disappear because players change uniforms. Then, she doubled down, saying she could have been way meaner in what she said originally, but she held back. She even confronted the reality that the players she was talking about didn't listen to the full clip. They just saw the full quote, the snippet, the viral bite-sized piece, and ran with that. That's 2025 sport.